Now I request all of you to please stand up for Kulvi. I request now Pragati to give a bouquet to our guest speakers, Dr. Subhash. I request the convener of Institute of Secretary, Professor A.K. Jain, to introduce the guest speaker.
Okay, good evening to all of you. It is our great pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Sudarshan. Dr. Sudarshan was born on 30th December 1950 in Karnataka, and he obtained his MBBS degree from Bangalore Medical College, and he is currently adjunct professor at BHFI and honorary fellow of the Association of Royal Surgeons of India. His written biodata is quite long. I am not going to read that here. I will just point out few things selectively. But what I learned from a brief association with Dr. Sudarshan, that he was motivated to do a degree in medical doctor, become a medical doctor at the age of 12. And then a family tragedy struck in a village, and he could not find any medical support for it. And then he decided that I will become a doctor. He was motivated at the age of 16. He came in contact with the mission of Vivekananda and the Ramakrishna mission. And then he decided that he will work under this mission and fulfill the aims of the mission by serving the people who are in the most dire need of health care and education and other educational care. So with this, he is continuing for the last more than 30 years now, and serving the people. And he told me that they have got several programs, like there is a program run under Vivekananda Girijan Kalyan Kendra. This was for the tribals only. Then there is a Karuna Trust, which is there for the last 25 years, and it provides integrated rural development. They have almost more than 70 rural healthcare centers running. And they work in areas like Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, and Odisha, and the tribal belts of Odisha and Karnataka, and like this, which are remotely accessible. So this indicates the dedication of Dr. Sudarshan in fulfilling the aims that he decided to or focused upon at the age of 16, and he has been very long. I just mentioned that he is presently a member of several number of bodies, like member of the working group on NRHMO Planning Commission, 12th Five-Year Plan. He is an Ashoka Fellow, member of National Commission on Population of Government of India, and so on, National Nutrition Mission. He has been president of the Voluntary Health Association of Karnataka, member of Executive Committee of National Literacy Mission. He has received a number of awards, almost 27 of them. I just mentioned that he received the Rajyotsav State Award from the Government of Karnataka in 1984. The Right Livelihood Award, which is known as Alternate Nobel Prize from Sweden, 1994. He was conferred the Padma Shri by Government of India in 2000. The Vivekananda Medal by the Ramakrishna Mission in 2004. The Mother Teresa Memorial Award in 2013. The Social Impact Award 2012 by the Times of India. So with these words, I request Dr. Sudarshan to kindly come and deliver his lecture.
Respected Professor Jain, head of the department, all the faculty, senior faculty members of the department, and IIT Roorkee, and my dear students. It's indeed a great honor to be in the midst of you this evening. The first time I am coming, I have been invited to IIMB and IIM Ahmedabad, but IIT this is the first time, and I am grateful that I have come to the IIT Roorkee. And this is the most, I'm happy to learn from Mani the history of this institution, which has great glorious past, and I am delighted to be in the midst of you this evening. First of all, Dr. Anil also has been working very hard, invited me, and I am moved by the enthusiasm of the students making arrangements, and also Ramakrishna Mission here, Arkangal, has come all the way, and they have put the exhibition. I know the brahmacharis who have come here, they are also from Karnataka. It's a very happy moment to be in the midst of you. Today, for the next few minutes, I am not a great orator or an intellectual professor. I don't have qualifications to really give a talk. I am sharing with you whatever little I learned for the last 32 years of my working with the poor people. And also my own history of how I was inspired by Vivekananda and what little work I have done. The good work I have done, it's because of one spark of Swami Vivekananda which inspired me at the age of 16. Swamiji's, very briefly, there were two incidents in my life. At the age of 12, as Professor just mentioned, I went to a village to literally helplessly watch my own father die, and I could not get a medical help for him. There was no doctor in that village. Instead of that tragedy depressing me, I made a decision that day, I will become a doctor. And rest of the life, that incident made me to save thousands of lives. So I think it's very important that when tragedy happens, how to convert that tragedy into a positive effect in our life, to see that such tragedy does not happen to other people. Now, I had good marks in, we used to call pre-university at that time, but I was underage. And those days in primary school, there was what's called a double promotion. I was jumped from second standard to fourth standard. my as a teacher in the village thought I can jump that class. So in the medical college they caught me. They said you have to complete by October 30th, 16 years. I was completing on December 30th. So I had to take 1 year off. And I worked in a floor mill. I had to earn money. And for me at that time it was 275 rupees fees for medical college. But that was 2.5 months of salary which I earned and paid the next year at the college. I graduated from Bangalore Medical College. It was at that moment when I was working in a floor mill at the age of 16, one of my friends took me to Ramakrishna Mission in Bangalore, read about Vivekananda. First, his biography, which inspired me, and then of course the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, most important, all of you know the lectures from Colombo to Almora, which inspired me. And within those few weeks of my contact with the Ramakrishna Mission, I had received the inspiration, the mantra, as I call it, they alone live who live for others, rest are more dead than alive. It's a famous quotation of Swami Vivekananda. I think that's a true mantra for me because that reverberates whatever little work I've been, that source of inspiration, constant, that mantra from Vivekananda has inspired me to do. And what was the philosophy of the work which I am doing? Again, Swamiji's quotation. As long as millions live in hunger and poverty, I hold every man a traitor who, having been educated at their expense, pays not least heed to them. Now, government spent on every medical student about 20-25 lakhs now. I don't know how much they spend on IIT graduates, but doctors, at least it's quite expensive. They spend quite a bit of money. Now, what Swami Vivekananda is saying is, where does that money come? That comes from commercial tax, 70% of the revenue from the commercial tax. Every tribal, every poor person who buys a matchbox to any food items, a commercial tax, that's a taxpayer's money which we are educated. So it's what Swamiji says is, it's our duty to pay back to that society from which we are educated. Otherwise, he uses a very strong word. I think that's the basis when we are part of the society. And again, the knowledge which we get is 400, 500 years of medical science which has evolved, and it has been transmitted from the society to me in the college, and it's my duty to use that knowledge for the sake of the society. It's a simple philosophy of life which Swamiji has said, and that became the philosophy of my life. Swamiji, there are Ramakrishna Mission's brahmacharis here who are very well qualified to talk about Swamiji. I am not an expert, but Swamiji's key message, what little I have read, I was also in the Ramakrishna Mission. After my graduation, I worked in a place, I don't know how many of you know, near Pithoragarh district, near Almora. There is a place called Mayavati, where Vivekananda himself established an Advaita ashram, and there is a hospital. I worked there for almost 1 year after my graduation in 1974. So I have some contact with the Uttarakhand, and I had the unique opportunity of reading a little bit of Vedanta, the Gita, Upanishads and all of that. So what was the Swamiji's message? Swamiji's message, the life-giving message of Vedanta, the potential divinity of man. We don't teach them, but we are experts in teaching the horrible aspects of Manusmriti, how many times we should wash right hand and left hand, how leftovers have to be given to the lower caste. Manusmriti has all of that, which I am not going to elaborate. So we don't want that type of smritis, we wanted eternal truths of Vedanta, the potential divinity of man. The same divinity is there, whether he is a Kalpariya, whether he is SC, ST or anybody else, OBC or anybody. It's the same ground being, the substratum is the same, the consciousness is the same, the Atman is same. That's the basis of social equality, and that's Swamiji established. Based on that, he said, if it's the same consciousness in everybody, and if their pain becomes my pain, so it cannot be. If I am part of your being, my consciousness is part of your consciousness, how can we, that's the basis of empathy, but that's the basis of service. So he wanted life-giving principles of Vedanta to be put into practice for upliftment of the masses. Second, Karma Yoga, in the traditional path we had the Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Raj Yoga. They were very well known. but most of the schools in India, they said the Karma Yoga is not an independent path. Karma Yoga is only for purification, and then you have to have one of the other yogas to attain the goal. But Swamiji said, by doing Karma Yoga, selfless work, you can attain the same goal as Bhakti and Jnana. I think that credit goes to Swami Vivekananda, where he emphasized Karma Yoga, the selfless work, as important. Even now the traditional schools, the great mutts and all of them will not accept Karma Yoga as an independent path, but Swamiji had the courage to say that Karma Yoga also can take you to the same mukti, same goal as the other paths. And he made this motto, Atmana Mokshartham Jagatitayacha, one's own salvation and the service to the fellow beings, as the motto of the Ramakrishna mission, which all of us believe. Well, the traditional mutts never bothered about serving others. They were busy with their own studies and one's own salvation rather than service for others. And this message of hope and courage for the oppressed, you should read Swamiji, the way the strong words he uses. And he had that deep empathy for the suffering people of India. He traveled all over the country, stayed with Maharajas, stayed with the pariahs, lowest people, ate what they ate, saw their poverty, utter poverty, and he wanted to give the message of hope and courage. The same divinity, the same Atman is there in everybody, and we need to take them from the oppressed people have to be brought up. And he believed in the muscles of iron, nerves of steel. The famous quotation. Again, he wanted a total integrated personality where physical, mental and spiritual aspects of the personality develops. Said he wanted 100 young youth, sometimes he said 1,000. We can transform the country. He wanted such people, and I'm sure many of them are here in this gathering. Now, having said this, the Swamiji's relevance to this present day India. We are 66 years after independence. We have achieved a lot. I am a proud patriot of this country, and I am proud of what the country has achieved since independence. But we could have achieved much more if we had addressed these three major issues. These are the three major issues I personally feel are very, very important in the country. One is we have done development, but not sustainable development. We are looting the natural resources. The mining in Karnataka, we keep on driving, and the big dams and all that big development projects, but at the cost of the conserving the natural resources and sustainable development. Second, the equity issues. Even now, the absolute number of below poverty line is still a major problem. There are about, whether it is 30%, whether it is $1 or $1.50, doesn't matter, but there are poor people, 35 to 40% of poor people. We have not solved that inequity between the rich and the poor. Our growth is taking place, economic growth, maybe last year 5, but we have reached almost 9%. But that growth is not percolating down. Some of our theories of that, this capitalist theory is that this growth will also ultimately with the welfare society should percolate down. But it's not percolating down. The number of rich people, the rich are becoming richer, the poor are becoming poorer. Caste is still a major problem. We have two extremes. The real reservation which has to help the needy people, it's not helping them. On the contrary, the politicized reservation which is helping the much more affluent people. It has happened in Karnataka, the vice chancellor's 2 children get reservation quota. Whereas the Soliga tribes, in the forest dwelling tribes, the scheduled tribe population in Karnataka has increased from 18 lakhs to almost 58 lakhs, not because the fertility of the Soliga genuine tribes. Other forward communities were added under scheduled tribe as a political propaganda. So now a genuine tribe, Soliga tribe, has to compete with other forward communities who are also brought under scheduled caste. So we still have a caste problem, gender issues. All of us know there is a lot of gender inequity. As a doctor, I think the most worrying is the 0 to 6 girl child population, which is increasing, sex-selective abortions which are happening, the serious crime which is very important, regional disparities. The BMAR states in India, and each state has very backward areas in the country. marginalized people were not enough for the marginalized people. So this was on the list. We should have done much better with all these things. Thirdly, good governance. Corruption is a major issue. Whether it's a Gopher scam or a coal scam where prime ministers are involved, to a Gram Panchayat member, it's ubiquitous. The corruption is from prime minister to Gram Panchayat members level. The corruption is really rampant. I have tried to work in all these areas. Equity issue I want to share in terms of health. In major cities in India today we have PET scans, an important tool for early diagnosis of cancer, very important tool, diagnostic tool. We have MRIs, PET scans, CAT scans, all of them. But in rural India today, if you have a simple microscope with a laboratory technician and few 100,000 rupees worth of chemicals, we can diagnose tuberculosis, leprosy and malaria, three major important illnesses. Even that facility is not available in the primary health centers in India. This is the contrast, the diagnostics. Then we do heart surgeries, heart transplants, liver transplant. Most of the organs we are doing transplants. But in rural India, people die of simple hookworm anemia. Hookworm anemia caused by hookworm, and it needs about 2 rupees worth of albendazole, the antihelminthic, which can remove them, and a few rupees worth of iron to be supplemented. Even that we are not able to provide health care. I've seen, even now see people with 2 grams hemoglobin. We are supposed to have 15 grams hemoglobin. This is the tragedy of this country. We have two contrasts. I'm not saying we should not have PET scans and MRIs. They are also needed. We are as good as now. There is also talk about tourism, commercializing the healthcare as a tourism, and they can come and get operated here. It's much cheaper. But at the same time, we should see that the healthcare reaches the poor in our own country. So we need to do that. These are the two extremes which we see. Health services for the scheduled caste and remote scheduled tribe areas are very poor. And every poor person, what is worrying is what is called out-of-pocket expenditure. We have a public health system where people are supposed to be provided a free health care, but what the surveys, the evidence has shown that even the poor people spend about 70% from their own pocket for health care. Already they are poor and they spend 70% on health care where they are not supposed to spend. They are supposed to spend that money on the nutrition and food. They are not doing it. Health infrastructure, we have huge health infrastructure, sub-health centers, primary health centers. We have a big list. It's not enough. We need to probably increase, but the existing ones are not functional. That's the problem. We have good buildings, but the doctors are not staying there in the primary health centers. The health workers are not there. Human resources is a serious problem. MBBS doctors, we have very good training, we have very good curriculum, but we are preparing doctors to go abroad. Our curriculum is as good as for working in UK or in America. So people prefer to go there or do post-graduation. Very few people want to work in the primary health centers. Now we had come out with alternate solution of 3-year course of BRHC, which finally is getting through. The cabinet has approved, and finally the parliamentary committee came in the way, but finally all the hurdles have been created. I think we should flood the country with this 3-year course. People don't want to call them doctors, but I have no hesitation in calling them doctors, and they should reach out to all primary health centers and sub-centers, and we need to do that. How long we can wait for the MBBS doctors to go and serve in the rural areas? Now there are shortage of specialists, so we need to do alternate certificate courses. We have MBBS doctors with a certificate course doing emergency obstetric surgeries, IRAN and FRU, and we can do that. We also have a huge indigenous Ayush, Ayurvedic yoga, and which are alternate sources of human resources which we need to make use of. Health financing is again very poor. We used to spend 0.9% of GDP on health. Manmohan Singh promised that it will go up to 2 to 3%. It has been just increased to about 1.5% of GDP, and then it has made a lot of difference. I think we need to spend more money. Again, public versus private. In India, the private healthcare, people pay for the private services is almost 2/3, and the public services is only 1/3. Per capita spending is hardly 675. When I make this presentation, people are shocked that we spend only Whereas in UK and America, they spend at least $30,000 per capita for the healthcare. In UK also at least 50,000 pounds, but ours is 675. And for primary healthcare, which I am providing, we spend hardly 200 rupees per person. Quality is again poor quality of health services. You keep on reading about it. There is no quality. Accreditation is very important. There is also a lot of corruption. The Medical Council of India is a terrible body. I know Medical Council was supposed to regulate the professional. It's a professional body to regulate ethics amongst the professional body. But MCI ignored that responsibility and they became very interested in sanctioning medical colleges. That's where the real money was, and the president of MCI was caught when he was accepting 2 crores bribe for a new medical college. So that's the Professional Medical Council of India, which has degenerated today, and we need to really reform the Karnataka Medical Council. For example, today I am registered in Karnataka Medical Council. They don't know that I am dead, I am abroad, or I am out of the state, because there is no re-registration, there is no continuing medical education to re-register. So we need to really improve on all of that. Drugs quality is a serious issue. Again, private sector is there. I am not against private sector, but the poor people accessing private sector is a serious problem and we need to do. And there is corruption in the private sector too. Now, with this background, my challenge was to reach the unreached. Was the very important question. So I started my work. As I said, I worked in Ramakrishna Mission and then later on in West Bengal. I was there as a brahmachari of the Ramakrishna Mission. Then I took the permission of my guru and then went and started this VGKK in the Veerappan's territory. All of you know about it. I started my work in Veerappan's territory, which is bordering the Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. And then we have extended that into Naxalite areas, and we also work in insurgency. I don't know how many of you are aware of insurgency problem in the northeast. There are parallel governments. In 2 districts of Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, it's very rampant. Tripura and also Nagaland, very serious problem. So we work in those areas also, remote hilly tribal areas. In Arunachal Pradesh, out of the 12 primary health centers we run, 9 of them do not have electricity, no telephone connectivity. You have to come to the nearest taluk or block level to make a telephone. Even cell phones do not, the towers have not been built. Bad roads cut off during the rainy season. Both public and private are not available. So with this idea, we started VGKK this is the Bihar Hills. It was a wildlife sanctuary. People living there were called Soligas. There are megalithic burial sites in this region showing that people were there 800 BC. Why I am showing this slide is very often, once it's declared as a tiger reserve, the first thing the tiger conservationists tell is to displace all the tribal people. They think tigers are more important than the tribal people themselves. I don't understand that. If people and tigers were living together from 800 BC, why do you want to separate them now? I think they are part of the biodiversity, and whatever tiger conservation, we are saying community-based tiger conservation, involve the tribals in the tiger conservation, and we can do it. They are also called soligas. Soliga is a shoalite thicket, a bamboo thicket living. There are 2 theories about their origin. Our Dravidians will not accept their word pre-Dravidians. I genuinely feel the tribal people in South India are pre-Dravidians. But whatever may be, either they are early Dravidians who got separated or they are pre-Dravidians. It doesn't matter, but they are the most aboriginal people. They were doing shifting cultivation, food gathering and hunting. And this Bihar Hills was a hunting place for Mysore Maharaja. And the first destruction of biodiversity started with a coffee estate by Morris, one Australian. Now it is Birlas have taken over it. And many other forests, like Wildlife Act, forest departments have come and interfered with the lifestyle of the tribals. There's a big champak tree which they worship. They are basically nature worshippers. It's about 600 years old. They worship sun, the big champak tree. These are the shola forests. Tribal culture is basically living in harmony with nature. I think if you read Rigvedic period, how the sages live, exactly this is the tribal culture. They were nature worshippers in Rigveda. Even Swami Vivekananda was very famous quoting this, Madhuvata Rata, let trees give us happiness, let wind give us happiness, let rain give us happiness. They were all hymns about the nature gods. So that's the culture of the tribals. no distinction between the secular and sacred. There was no transcendental reality. The immanent reality was more important than the transcendental realities. Everything was sacred. Take what you need for your basic needs and give back to nature. If you cut a tree, you have to plant a tree. Present moment for them is more important than the past or the future. And they had a perfect integration of head and heart, the masculine and the feminine. Sustainable development, I think we are talking about sustainable development. If you go back and see all the tribal cultures, they did a wonderful sustainable development. Because of their philosophy is to live in harmony with nature. Take what little you want, not the greed of you. The greed of the humankind has destroyed the nature. So we need to really say sustainable development, all of you know, the Brundtland Commission meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. There's environmental sustainability, economic and socio-political sustainability. We all know about the Rio. So all three are important, but they also emphasize the most important is the cultural, the tribal culture is the fourth pillar of sustainable development, and it is in this tribal culture that sustainable development is possible. Now, what are the basic principles of tribal development? If you want to go and work with them, first, I think this is what I have learned, living with the people, understand their strengths first, and then understand their traditional knowledge, humility to learn from people. It's very important. My first case of emergency obstetric care came, and I was trained in Bangalore Medical College, and most of the obstetric textbooks are Western textbooks. Very few Indians had written textbooks at that time. So we were taught we have to put them on the obstetric table, and we have to do episiotomy and enlarge the birth canal. My first delivery, she refused to lie down on my obstetric table. She said, we never conduct deliveries lying down, we always squat and then deliver. There is a rope hanging, they lift themselves up, and then the gravity helps, the pelvic muscles can contract much better. So I was forced that day to conduct a delivery in the traditional posture of the tribals which they used to do with the traditional birth attendant. I thought it was ignorance. Now, enough evidence to show that that's the ideal posture for mother to deliver babies. Why have we designed these obstetric tables? We doctors and nurses don't get back pain. You get back pain to do that. It's a profession-oriented obstetric table, not the patient, the client-oriented. I think we don't mind bending our back and we can conduct deliveries. So we have 2 labor rooms in our. First we try the traditional method, and it works very well. In the last 32 years, in this 20,000 population, we hardly had 3 cesarean sections. Very important. Whereas in the cities now, 20 to 25% are becoming cesarean sections. So we need to understand. So before dumping everything as superstition, we need to have the humility to learn what are the people have survived from 800 BC. There must be some strengths in them, in spite of our modern technology and science. So we should respect that, build on those strengths. That's very important. And respect diversity. In the name of patriotism, in the name of bringing them to the national mainstream, so-called national mainstream, we want to homogenize people. I think the diversity is the strength of the country. Don't homogenize people. Accept them as they are. There is a unity already built. The spiritual current, the substratum is the unity which Swami Vivekananda also spoke. So unity does not mean homogenization. Everybody should wear the same dress, same culture. Everything has to be same. No, I think that's the problem with the seed varieties which you had in agriculture. The organic seed varieties versus the Monsanto having the lab there, they control the gene pool and the same gene is released, and if there is a crisis and we have to beg them to get a new gene. So instead of that, the genes were saved with the farmers. So I think we should have varieties. We should not, diversity is the same, and don't, so-called national mainstream is the richness of this diversity. Now, traditional knowledge systems, their knowledge about forests, their knowledge about health practices, their traditional agriculture, traditional knowledge, all these are very important, and I am happy to say now the tribals are working on it. We have a comprehensive tribal health care, both enabling them preventive, promotive and curative services. We also looked at the health profile of the people. This is very important to learn from the Soliga culture. People living in the core area of the forest, people living in the periphery of the forest, and people who are totally alienated from forest, who have been displaced from the forest. I'm yet to find a colonic cancer, no appendicitis, no ischemic heart disease, no hypertension in the people living in the core area of the forest. Very important. No cesarean sections there either. And you see all the, no HIV, no STD. And people who are alienated from forest, you see all these problems. They're high roughage in their diet. They eat about 23 varieties of leafy vegetables. Non-sedentary lifestyle. They will be working till they get labor pains, then they deliver. They don't make big fuss of the whole process of pregnancy and delivery. So they have these healthy lifestyles. I think we need to preserve that, very important. There are occupational hazards of snake bites, mauling-bug bears, trying to escape from elephants, they have fractures. All these are problems are there. But still I find they are much safer than walking on the footpaths of Bangalore. You never know when you will be hit out, so I think that's much safer that way. This is very important because today the crisis in the country is all these problems are getting into rural areas, the non-communicable diseases, the obesity, the problems of lifestyle diseases are increasing, and we need to learn from the tribals about the lifestyle diseases and how to control them. I started with the healthcare, and I found children roaming around, no education. Next year in 1980 I started my work. 81 I started a small school with 6 children in a tribal hut. And I am very proud to say out of the 6, 4 have become postgraduates. And Jadia has completed his PhD and he is the president of the organization. And many postgraduates and graduates have come out of this institution now. We are now with 500, we have varieties of school programs. I will not escape all this. We have sustainable tribal education. I am a strong believer of educating people in the mother tongue. Very, very important. There are people who raise objections about it. I studied in a Kannada medium and I have no problem. I think every child has to have a right to study in their own, especially tribals, because it's not only the language, their culture, it is about their culture and their traditions, and it's about their environment we should teach in the formative period, and not something about Vidhan Sabha. So we change the curriculum in the school. We talk about Big Champak Tree, about their folk songs, about their environment and their culture, than about the modern textbook. Finally, I had to fight with the government to make this a textbook. Now it is formally accepted as a textbook. We have several innovations in education appropriate to tribals. These are some of the health activities. Abdul Kalam has been a very good friend of ours. Before he became the president, he one day telephoned to me. One of the spiritual person has told me to find 100 punyatmas. These are the exact words he said, used. 100 punyatmas who can change the country. And I am looking for that. Somebody has suggested your name. I want to come and meet you. So he came all the way to Bihar Hills, stayed with us for a day, and it was a great source of inspiration. Such a wonderful personality he is. Very simple and very inspiring. And then when he was the president, I thought he had forgotten us, and we invited him for the 25th anniversary. He came. It was tough to receive the president in Bihar Hills at that time, and Veerappan's problem was also there. But still he came all the way, and he blessed us, and he talks about our work all the time in his talks. We have mobile medical units, which that's no problem. Okay. These are the mobile medical units which go strong. Maybe batteries now. Yeah. Okay. So health. They also have a sickle cell anemia, a type of genetic disease. And why I'm saying this appropriate technology? I needed an electrophoretic machine for hemoglobin analysis. So I went to St. John's Medical College. They didn't take up the blood samples, and the equipment was very expensive. Even Bangalore Medical College didn't have that. So my brother is an electronic engineer. It's a 2 platinum wires and a electrolyte solution in 2 plastic. We made it for 400 rupees, and we could do it. And it was, at that time I had a friend from Australian University, one Dr. Carr. He helped me, and we cross-analyzed the findings which we did in our simple electrophoretic machine, and they were accurate, quite accurate. So
appropriate technology is very important. That's where I think in this country we need you as IIT graduates. My appeal to you is how can the appropriate technology which can transform the rural poor in India is very important. When I was a medical student, we need to have intraocular lenses. They were all imported. It used to cost 20,000 rupees. This was in 1970s. Today, it's a piece of plastic. Today, we are able to manufacture in India for 80 rupees. 80 rupees, and we can do intraocular surgery and provide intraocular lens instead of the thick lenses which we used to provide earlier. And we do it within 800 to 900 rupees. The Western people cannot understand. The cost has come down, and this technology, this piece of plastic was, the commercial firms are just exaggerated, and it has been brought down to 80. That's the type of technology we need today, which has transformed the entire rural India. The major cause of blindness was the cataract, and cataract not operated and provided, they used to become blind. And today intraocular lenses are so cheap. We need that type of appropriate technology. Now, we found the human resources in tribal area very difficult to get. Non-tribals do not want to stay in the interior tribal areas and the forest areas. So we took the challenge, trying the first tribal girls as the ANMs. We took the 7th standard girls also, but Nursing Council didn't recognize them. So now, for the recognition of the Nursing Council, we are taking 12th pass. Of course, now we can. Earlier, we didn't have so many educated people, and took it as a challenge, and we are now an auxiliary nurse midwife school with qualified people doing health education, women's self-help groups, a lot of natural minor forest produce which we process, add value. When I went there, tribals were getting 10 rupees, 7 rupees per kilo of honey. Now they earn about 120 rupees for 1 kilo of honey. That's just made a lot of difference. Lantana is a weed which they manufacture and the furniture. We have a technology resource center, also organic farming, how to preserve the traditional seed varieties in the tribal communities which are very sick. I mean, the seed varieties for preservation of the simple technology. You hang it on the top of the oven. The smoke itself is a very good insecticide. It makes the smoke keeps the seed varieties intact. So that gene pool in the tribal huts is a greater gene pool than the Monsanto's gene pool. So we need to have the seed varieties in the farmers' huts than anywhere else. Community organization, tribals were not organized. We helped them with a traditional system also they had, and today they are able to participate in the Panchayat Raj system. And the major problem was the land. Earlier there was a land alienation. Whatever little land they had, the landlords would take thumb impressions and get the land in their names. And that's when I thought I had to go beyond the healthcare and education into their land rights also. I was in the jail for 2 days in the struggle for getting their land rights. And today, after 30 years of struggle, we have Forest Rights Act. Tribals have got all the tribals have got land rights and community rights, which is a long battle of 30 years to get them. We also have a Gorukana ecotourism project where instead of big Taj Group and the others running ecotourism, the tribal community-based ecotourism project where the care of the land, care of the people and the care of the wildlife goes together. People have come there and managed by tribal people. They show them a very good experience. When the city children come there and our children, tribal children, take them to forest. We had a simple competition of Madha, who later on became MSc Botany. You could identify about 180 plants and trees. They had the same Soligat names and he had written down. They had to collect the leaf of the plant or tree in the forest. And of course, after he became MSc Botany, the difference for me was he knew all the Latin names. I don't know whether any other difference was there. But obviously, he must have got much better knowledge. What I am saying is there is knowledge. Even a small child of 3 years knows which are the edible mushrooms, which are the non-edible mushrooms. I am sure many of us cannot identify them. So there is a knowledge which they wanted for their survival and which we need to keep intact. This is a ecotourism project where we have cottages. We now are trying to become self-reliant for the not only for the tribal development but also for conservation. Community participation in biodiversity is very important, and we are trying to see that the people living there are part of the biodiversity and they are also involved in the conservation. Now 50% of the tribal income comes from the collection of minor forest produce. The value addition is done, and we have shown that participatory resource monitoring is possible, and we can have a sustainable type of harvesting. Now, Forest has the Forest Act, Wildlife Act, Biodiversity Act, all of them talked about conservation and never talked about tribals as part of that. And they were asked, they were at the receiving end. Thanks to the Tribal Forest Rights Act of 2006, which is a unique, and that act starts with the first sentence is, for the historical injustice done to the tribal people, this act has been promulgated. I think that justifies the whole thing. And with that, now we are able to get land rights and the community rights for the tribal people. We also had this Veerappan phenomenon, the Naxalite. What I want to say is Veerappan is basically the corrupt system throwing up a huge monster. Second, Naxalite problem in Biharis we don't have. That's because the Maoists, if we do good development, the Maoists will not come there. Whereas in the eastern India we have this entire belt where the exploitation is much severe. That's where the entire Maoist group, starting from Tripura to northeast to down to almost Andhra Pradesh, we have this Naxalite movement. Rahul Gandhi was asked by Jairam Ramesh, who was a good friend, said if you want to understand tribals, come there, go and visit. So he came all the way. He said no politician inside the campus. He came without the politicians, spent some time. And only thing which was helpful for the tribals was the Forest Rights Act, which was just implemented by UPA government. It took much, because of his presence and his talking, made the tribal people get the land rights much faster. So we covered Karnataka, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya. I'll briefly tell about Andaman. How many of you have been to Andaman Islands? Any? Oh, good. Very good. Now there are what are called primitive tribals. It's a wrong word. People are changing that name now. These are really vanishing tribes, about 5 groups of them. The Great Andamanis were reduced to about 24, 28 of them. Now they are about 42, 43. They are in the Great Strait Island. It's a pathetic their condition now. There is supposed to be a clinic to look after them, a pharmacist. I found a nemucilide, which is a drug not approved in the entire America and Europe. In this country we allow it. It's very dangerous for children. Nemucilide syrup should never be used, and for children it's a very dangerous one. That syrup was given to the Great Andamanis children there. We are such a precious people. So this is the type of development which we do, and we were I wrote a very strong remark on that. Wanges, Jarvas are wonderful people. We were an expert group to look at the health of the tribal people and suggest whether we should immunize them or what type of health care we should do that. It was a hard decision. Finally we said no immunization for Jarvas at this stage. There are about 220 people. Even polio drops, for example, can cause flaccid paralysis. So babies are very precious. And if you don't want to introduce something which was not there. So we have to be very cautious. We will see how, observe them, and whenever needed only we will add on this healthcare system only for emergency. First we need to understand the traditional system, how they do it. But we also did check their blood pressures, 80 by 60. The cholesterol is very low, very healthy, it's beautiful people. It's always smiling. I don't think they understand stress and all that, and wonderful. We were not deciphered the language, it was only through oral communication, sign language, but it was very interesting, such healthy people who are there. We need to learn from them, and all of you know sentinels are in the Sentinel Island, and very little communication. So far they have not come out of the island, and little contact with them. Of course they have a right to be independent. Again, in the name of national mainstream, I don't think we should take away from there. Let them decide when they want to be part of the civilization, so-called civilization. I don't know what is civilization, so-called civilization, and they will be part of that. These are the Jarvas on the left-hand side, and the Great Andamanis on the other side. So we also found a lot of leprosy which was not there, spreading into tribal areas. So I found the leprosy in the rural areas of in the Koleral and other areas we need a lot of leprosy. So I got trained in leprosy and started the Karnataka Trust. And that's when we found we were doing work parallel to the government. Government is also spending money. So I went to the health secretary, why can't we have partnership? Whichever primary health center you are not able to manage, you hand it over to us and we will do it. So that's how the public-private partnership started. And we run all this for the government in various states, which are quickly straight. We believe in preventive, promotive, and curative health services. This is the concept of a primary health care. We have primary health center, 6-bedded pharmacy, obstetric room, and we have shown that with little 25% less than what government is spending, we were able to bring down the infant mortality rate from 75 to, we don't have the last 14, it has come down to 18 now. So these are the children saved. This was my ambition of studying medical school, and I am very proud in all our primary health centers. Now we cover about 1 billion population. The number of children saved, almost 1,000 children every year, if we can save, that is the type of healthcare we need, and the immense satisfaction and joy and fulfillment you find by saving lives is something tremendous. I mean, all of you know you have chosen IIT, but as a doctor, I say two things have helped me to give me tremendous joy. One was when I was alone as a doctor, a person had an anaphylactic shock, the heart had stopped, lungs had stopped. I could do resuscitation, and the first heartbeat sounds which came back and the breathing started. The joy of that is still lingering in me. That saving somebody whose heart has stopped and reviving them is something tremendous. Secondly, we have the eye hospital. A woman comes with both eyes cataract, not able to see. A grandchild will bring with a stick, probably you have seen that famous photos. They bring them to the hospital and we operate them, and we put the intraocular lens, open the eyes after 24 hours. Earlier they had to wait for 6 weeks to get the thick lenses. Now intraocular lens, when we open after 24 hours, they can see the smile on the face of that woman when she sees. That is the effect. Because she was totally blind, both eyes cataract, unable to see. That joy, I don't think anything else can compensate for. The PPP, the government identifies the most difficult PHCs and gives it to that. But what is the uniqueness of these PHCs which we run from the government? When we recruit people and motivate and train them, what is not negotiable? They have to stay in the primary health center. They cannot stay in the taluka headquarters and go. All the staff stay in that. Essential drugs are available. 24/7 services are available. That makes a lot of difference. All services are free. The institutional deliveries have increased, the maternal mortality has come down. These are the outcome indicators in terms of IMR has come down to 13. So these are the results which we have shown. And within those limitations of 200 rupees per person per year, we make several innovations. Telemedicine, in BRH we take an ECG and send it to Narayan Hridayalaya. In 5 minutes we create a cardiologist report. This is possible. You want an X-ray, we don't have a radiologist, you scan and send it, you get a radiologist report. The telehealth has tremendous potential. This is a simple digital ECG machine which can be transmitted and you get a cardiologist report. This is an EMS. This was designed by one of my friends, a Canadian surgeon in Norway. He spends 1 week, 1 month every year and designing something for the primary health care. We designed this. With this we can save all the emergencies within the primary health care. From ambush bag to snake bite to any of the emergencies can be managed, and we have done this. Integrating traditional medicine into primary health care. There is what's called Adatoda Osaka. I don't know the Hindi name for that. A cough syrup, a bottle costs about 60 to 70 rupees. A Codex, Benadryl, all of them. And my definition of a cough syrup is colorful bottle, sugary syrup, 4 to 5% alcohol, and few paise worth of antihistamine. So instead of spending 50 to 70 rupees on that, boil 2 leaves of Adatoda Osaka. It's a very good cough remedy. And spend 60 to 70 rupees on good nutrition. They need good nutrition. And not on Benadryl, Codex and all of that. So we find 6 alternates which are not harmful to people, not expensive, which they can grow and use them. So I think we at this stage we have knowledge of 20 to 25% of the primary healthcare problems can be managed by traditional medicine. Mainstreaming eye care into now in the primary health centers itself, they can be screened and provide spectacles. Communication disorders, we have a premier institute in Mysore, but that has not been taken to the primary health care. Only at district hospitals they have for detecting. The most common is the pus oozing out from the ear, common infection. Actually, when you get ear pain in the children, even my mother did it for my brother, they put some oil or something. And what they need is a decongestant so that the tympanic membrane will not rupture. And once it ruptures, it becomes a chronic suppurative otitis media and pus loses out. They lose the hearing. So we can save this hearing loss due to chronic suppurative otitis media. So now we have made it part of the primary health care. Promotion of low-cost generic drugs. Today we have more than 1 lakh formulations in India, but the essential drug list which is needed is if we have about 600 drugs, we can manage 98% of the illnesses. And why we have these 1 lakh formulations? They are all bannable. We have no evidence that they are efficacious, questionable this thing. These are all unwanted medicines. So we need to really look at, and branded drugs are much more 2 to 3 times costlier than the generic drugs. So promoting generic drugs and sticking on to essential drug list is very, very important. Mentioning now communicable diseases, seems the non-communicable disease is also important in it's spreading now. Ashas are the pillars today, and we were able to train in the tribal areas. I am very proud that Government of India has taken under NRHM this, and they are the real pillars. We initiated a community health insurance with the lowest premium probably in the world, with 30 rupees per person per year. And we were the first to say that the poorest of the poor do not go to government hospital because they have nothing to eat. There are other expenditures, and there is nothing to eat at home, and they have medicines to purchase. So we said, even if the out of pocket, the daily wages loss has to be compensated, and also extra medicines have to be covered by this health insurance. We covered about 1 lakh, and now as a result of that we have what is called Yashasvi, where with 120 rupees premium we are able to do even heart surgeries. This is a government program initiative now done in entire Karnataka. Community planning, community processes are very important. Involving the community, making them feel that it is their health and their health is in their hands. They have to contribute. The service provider will provide something, but they need to plan for themselves. So preparing village health plans, the community process in what is called participatory rural appraisal techniques, to make they plan their village health plan and implement them. Citizens help desk in hospitals to see that the poor patients get access to the mobile health clinics in tribal areas. We also had a first referral unit where emergency obstetric care has to be done. And there, MBBS trained, a certificate course can do C-sections, and we have done fairly well there. Now we scaled it up in southern Karnataka. The challenge was we have Hyderabad, Karnataka, which is the poorest. Telangana, actually Telangana and Hyderabad should merge together. They are similar in several respects. The Nizam ruled areas. Poverty is very serious. So that area also we have shown this can work. And once we showed in Karnataka, they said Karnataka is a progressive state. Can we show it in northeastern India? And that's how the health secretary from Arunachal Pradesh called me and said, can you show us some results? Swaligas were very simple people, and they were not aggressive like the northeastern tribes. Either they have dagger or a gun with them. It's very tough people to deal with. So in 2005 we started, and I quickly showed this was a bombing PLC. I had to walk 24 kilometers. I walk every day at least minimum 12 kilometers. Today I could make only 4 kilometers, but I walk a lot, so I have no problem walking 24 kilometers. What I am saying is the roads are so bad, no electricity, no telephone connectivity, and that's how the PLC was. And that's how the pharmacy, when we took over, now we have essential drugs throughout the year. This is a Waka PLC, the insurgency problem. The collector and all the government officials pay 15% of their salary as a parallel tax to the insurgency people. There is a mediator who collects it. If they don't pay, they are taken care of. So, including, so they wanted 15% from us. I said, I have never done that. I would rather close down. So after 1 year, they said, they sent a message, we don't want 15% from you. You can open more primary health centers. So we had no problem to Veerappan, to Naxalites in Odisha, to insurgency people in Arunachal Pradesh. PLC Italian again is very remote. I think 2 districts in India where the collector does not stay in the headquarters. Here the road is cut off for 4 months, so the collector prefers to stay in the other district headquarters. But we have hospitals there also. This is a Jain PLC. This is a doctor with a Sorry. Doctor, his wife is a laboratory technician. We didn't have quarters for them. I myself stayed in a attached for about 15 years in DR Hill. I could motivate him for 2 years to stay in this attached. He stayed there. Now we have a better quarters. So we have very committed staff. We motivate them, and the inspiration is all because of Swami Vivekananda. The motivation comes from there. That empathy, unless you have it, you can't make these doctors stay in these very remote areas. This is a 1R PLC China border. These are some of the tough roads which we use. The Brahmaputra River is not like Ganga, much more ferocious, very difficult. Two of the PHCs, the health workers have to cross over the elephant. The boats also cannot take them. The river current is very fast, so during the season they take that. This is a symbol of reaching the unreached. This is an A&M. During the rainy season, there is no bridge to the village. Only way is the ropeway. She is using the ropeway with the vaccine carrier, taking and immunizing people in the right time. I think that's a we have the PHC staff training, and we have now tried to expand our into Arunachal, Meghalaya and Manipur. We are almost into now Bastar area. We were supposed to get, but the recent blast where politicians also got killed, the government has postponed it. So Madhya Pradesh and Bastar area will be starting in Chhattisgarh very soon. We are also working in Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir. So we cover about 1 million population. There is what's called a National Accreditation Board for Hospitals and Health. So I took the challenge that why can't a primary health center also get the accreditation? They were doing only hospitals. So we are the first in South India to get accreditation from the NABH. We not only provide healthcare, but quality healthcare is very important. Government was giving only 75% of what they were spending. Later on they increased to 90%, but we are negotiating. If you show better results, why don't you give us the full amount? Still it is tough. There is also red tapeism, corruption. Now corruption also, initially they all expected cuts, whatever commissions to be given. Once the brand is established, now they know Karnatas will not pay a single bribe. There may be delays, but they will not have the courage to ask us. So we spend less than the government, and as I said, about 150 rupees. Sorry. Now, I was also made the chairman of the task force on health and family welfare Karnataka government. We are asked to look at the entire health sector and plan for the rest of the 6 crores of people. We had a Karnataka state integrated health policy, and we identified 12 major issues of concern. As you see, corruption on the top of the list in the healthcare. Our health secretary was very upset. This is a government report. How can you put corruption on the top of the list? At least bring it on to 4th of April. I cannot present it to the chief minister. That was his helplessness. But I said, if we don't have the courage to, it was based on evidence. We traveled all over the Karnataka for almost 2 years and wrote this report. We had a lot of evidence. So I said, that is the important priority. And finally, it was accepted as it is, and we didn't change. I will not go into the other important issues. And that's how we had a very good progress with Lokayukta Act. And Justice Venkatachala had taken charge and he was visiting hospitals. So I met him and gave him a copy of the report. He said, you identified corruption as an issue, why don't you join me? So I was made vigilance director. I wanted to work already for the government, but they forced me for the immunity, judicial immunity which you get in Lokayukta. I was forced to take 1 rupee salary. For 4 years I worked with them. And quickly I'll show you the corruption in the health services. And thanks to Anna Hazare and the Aam Aadmi Party, Arvind is also a good friend of me. We have worked together much earlier on corruption issues. So, but in the health sector, how it can be done, how the systems can be changed, very briefly I will mention. This problem next. Yeah. Okay. We have heard of Corruption Perception Index. There is a Transparency International in Germany which ranks the countries based on the corruption. They started in 1995, and the lower the score, more corrupt the countries are. This is India's ranking. We were 34th ranked out of 41 countries. New Zealand was the first, Indonesia the last. As you see, there is a slight improvement after 2006. The score has improved. But still, we are one of the most corrupt. The latest ranking is 94th country out of 177 countries. We are still one of the most corrupt countries. Maybe we can pat ourselves, we are better than Pakistan and our neighbors Bangladesh, but we are still one of the most corrupt countries. See the entire Norwegian countries, they're all so good. So we need to really... They also looked at 10 public sectors and they found the police was the most corrupt. But the important thing is the health was the second most corrupt. I'll not go into the details. And the payment of money in the hospitals, money demanded in the southern states was much higher than the northern states. Maybe the bribe giving capacity in the south is better than the poor people in the north. How can they give bribes? Doctors demanded more than the other hospital staff. And they also ranked the states. See, Kerala has the best health indicators and they have the least corruption in the state. Bihar was at that time was the most corrupt. I think it has improved. British government, definitely it has improved. Health also is trying to improve, but Karnataka was the fourth most corrupt at that time. So I was justified in my report saying corruption as one of the major in Karnataka also. Okay. Now we have a drug control department. I will just finish in another 5 minutes. It's important for you to understand. We have a drug controller in every state and drug controller of India. The main responsibility is to see good quality of drugs are available to the people, citizens of this country. Now, they had, in the Karnataka state, they had tested 2,268 samples were declared not of standard quality and 126 spurious drugs. Spurious drugs means instead of antibiotic, there is water. Chalk powder, or instead of hydrocortisone, a life-saving drug, there is water in it. They identified 5 opened, bribes collected, no action taken on them. And when we seized all of those files, and then finally we had to sack the drug controller, and today, at least Karnataka, I can assure that the good quality drugs are available. This is the most corrupt organization within the health department. A blood bank also comes under them. They are given a HIV blood, a positive blood, without proper testing. Instead of taking action, they collected bribes and kept quiet, closed the file. Next. And this is a cartel of how the drug control department works. It took me 2 years to prepare this and understand how the mafia works in the drug control department. I am not going into the details. Drug procurement. 18% of the budget in Karnataka, our minister was a physician himself. 18% of the budget went for Nimesulide, which I hate to use. I never use Nimesulide myself. It's a very dangerous drug. And why 18% went there? That company gave the maximum kickbacks. So there was no paracetamol in the primary health centers, but Nimesulide was dumped because that's where the money was. There are a lot of, and there is also decentralized corruption also. The Zilla Panchayats can procure 60% of the drugs. And some of the drugs purchased in the Zilla Panchayats, we wrote to IDPL, they said they are not manufactured that drug at all. Somebody was putting these spurious drugs, labeling and supplying to the government. This is the cartel of how the previous one? Yeah. The cartel of how the drug mafia works, and we have been able to do something in Karnataka on that. Next. Equipment procurement. A dialysis machine costing 5 lakhs was bought for 12.6 lakhs. We got the invoices from the commercial tax department and they sold to the private hospitals for 5 lakhs, whereas the government hospitals, they bought it for 12.6. When we asked them, we have to give kickbacks to the minister, the director and the superintendent of the police. Otherwise, we can supply it for the superintendent of the hospital. Finally, the director of medical education was sacked. It was not 1, 12 dialysis machines. If you heard of any machine to remove cholesterol from the blood, they have bought one in Bowring Hospital in Bangalore. 60 lakhs of rupees, and the money was sanctioned by the finance department. They said, you buy this, we will reduce the funds. And then they bought it. Once they did it, and they needed 75,000 for each patient. Probably it was meant for a physiology department for some demonstration, and it's lying there. 60 lakhs of worth of machine bought. And corruption in procurement is very equipment. Everybody is interested in corruption in the hospitals. I call it an epidemic of corruption in health services. You have to bribe the ayahs, ward boys, the specialists. Everybody is involved. For admission, for giving urine patients are helpless. They want something. Bed panels to be given. You have to bribe them. For infusions, you have to bribe them. For X-ray, everywhere the bribes have to be paid. transporting patients from ward to the OT. This was in a Mysore Care Hospital, teaching institution, 200 rupees. To bring the patient from the OT to the ward, 250 rupees. Drive to the ward boy. Everywhere. I mean, the elective surgeries get postponed. You have to meet the surgeon, pay in the drive, then you will be posted next year. Deliveries after delivery to show the baby to the siblings. Male baby 250 rupees, female baby 200 rupees. Female babies are cheaper than the male. And postmortem, when the bodies are to do postmortem, you have to drive. Life cycle approach, from birth to death, you have to pay drives in the government. Corruption of the doctors themselves, private practice, having their own nursing homes, reference to private hospitals. They literally, if they have ultrasound, they spoil it so that they can come to the ultrasound of their own private clinic. ECG machines are spoiled so that they can come to their private. Very, very, very pathetic. Corruption in civil works, administration, recruitment and postings. That's the level of public service commission. Transfers and promotions. For the post of a drug controller, it was used to be 80 lakhs. And this was when a time, usually women are less corrupt than the men. But this was a lady who was the additional chief secretary holding the health secretary, principal secretary health. And she had streamlined. The post of a drug controller was sold for 80 lakhs. 80 lakhs was, and for DHOs, CMHOs, you probably district medical officers, it was around 25 lakhs. Everything, corruption was very well streamlined. Very, very unfortunate. And when we look at the suspend, the politicians are happy because reinstating suspended officers, the bribes are much more than the usual terms of it. Medical education, this is what is very shocking. The medical education commercialization has brought down the quality of medical services. It's a real story. One of our superintendent of police in Lokayukta, his daughter was studying in a private medical college. She comes and tells, tomorrow you have to give me 30,000 rupees. All are paying and I have to pay. And I know you are in Lokayukta. If you inform Lokayukta, I will commit suicide. She was blackmailing the father. So he didn't want to go to Lokayukta. He came to me and we discussed. We called the Vice Chancellor and we found it to be true. This is called, what is called as not to fail amount. If there are 100 students appearing for surgery, all of them have to pay that amount. There's a mediator who collects and gives it to the share between the external examiner and the internal examiner. And if you want a particular subject marks to be increased, that's a different package. This is a not to fail amount is a universal. Even merit students have to pay, otherwise you will be victimized. This was happening in Karnataka, in medical education. And you can imagine what type of quality of medical education can happen. And very, very, very pathetic and very, very serious, and we need to corruption in private health sector is also very serious. Today, you go to a private sector hospital, they will say you need 10 investigations. They have a secret coding, 3 you test, 7 you put normal values and collect the money for 10 investigations. I hope you understand what is all this. If I write an MRI, if I just prescribe an MRI costing about 16,000 rupees, I'll get 25% as commission in the evening. The check comes to the doctor for just prescribing an MRI. Commissions are very. This is a private sector corruption, unwanted hysterectomies, the way which are happening in Andhra Pradesh, very well known. This is what's called, you can always diagnose the dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Little excessive bleeding can be managed medically. But they want to remove the uterus. And now we have put it in the head of the mothers also. So they also come and demand you remove the uterus. So everybody, the way we are removing the hysterectomies, that is removal of the uteruses, very few uteruses will remain in our women's bodies. Hong Kong has done excellent work. I had a unique opportunity to visit some other countries. Independent Commission Against Corruption. They have remarkably brought down the corruption in the public and the private sector. So we made several reforms within the health system to really control. E-governance is one such integrity pact. We called all the manufacturers and they told them, next year we will assure that you don't have to pay any commissions to anybody. They brought down the prices by 50%. Next, we could buy with the same amount of budget, double the quantity of drugs. Once you assure them there is transparency, accountability, and they don't have to pay bribes, you can buy good quality drugs And many of the good companies were not participating because they were tired of this corruption in the system. So we need to really, this type of simple management skills, we can bring down the corruption. Ultimately, it has to be people's movement, Anna Hazare's or whatever. We need to bring in community monitoring is what is being done. Community self-monitoring whether service providers are providing properly or not. And this is where we started today. Swami Vivekananda said 3 qualities are needed for a leader or a social worker. The first is the concern, the empathy. If it is the same consciousness in all of them, their suffering should become my suffering. And this is very true. When once Swami Vivekananda got up in the middle when he was living in Belur Mat, got up in the middle of the night, he was pacing up and down, it's there in his biography. And he was saying somewhere people are crying and he was feeling intense pain. And next day papers, there was a big earthquake. That suffering he could identify himself. That's because the consciousness everywhere, that's the type of empathy we need. Can the suffering of the people can become my suffering? That's the first qualification Swamiji said. So it's not enough to shed tears about other suffering, but clear intellectual ability to understand why is that suffering and find a solution for that. That's also very important. Schools of social work, all of them teach about it. Thirdly, you might have good solutions, but the capacity, the willpower to put it into practice. That's very often we shed tears, we also plan, but we don't have the willpower to put it into practice. Because there are a lot of obstacles. Today, in the land of Mahatma Gandhi and Vivekananda people, and I want to stress one thing. I read a very good book on Eric Fromm. Eric Fromm is a humanitarian psychologist. He was echoing the whatever Vivekananda was saying. He used the word, coined the word self-hatred, self-love and all of that. And he has written, if you can access that book, I don't know, it's there, Art of Loving. It's a small book about 70 pages. And he analyzes various forms of love. And first he starts with the romantic love. And in the first paragraph itself he says, in the romantic love, he says we fall in love. Why should we fall? We should stand in love. But what he says is the love should be better, mature understanding, mature love, respect for each other. Romantic love is fine, but can it also ultimately lead to understanding each other, respecting each other? Then only it can sustain itself. So we analyze, and the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law sees the best example. Who has analyzed. He says the son is an extension of her own umbilical cord. Mother possesses that son. But when he matures and he has to marry, the daughter-in-law becomes a threat. He is taking away my umbilical cord connection. So she doesn't want to see that the son becomes independent. So that's a very good explanation. But as a mature mother, she knows that now he has to be independent and he has to be with the other daughter-in-law has come and I have to get detached from my son. That's a detached, mature love. Wonderful book. Why I'm saying that? Again, use the word self-hatred. I don't know how many of you smoke. Why do we smoke? Somewhere in the unconscious, we want to destroy ourselves. We want to kill ourselves. Every cigarette or a BD, whatever we smoke, we reduce our lifespan by, some say 1 day or 2 days, whatever it is. When we know that, why do we do that? It's conscious mind may not know it. Unconsciously, we want to destroy ourselves. That's why we take to alcohol, we take to drugs. That's because somewhere deep within the unconscious feeling of self-hatred, we want to destroy ourselves. I think we should love. It's a unique personality. Nature has given us the unique body. Those who understand the physiology and anatomy of this body, it's a great gift given to us. And we need to respect it and take care of it. Not narcissist idea, but self-love. Some amount of self-love of our own personality is important, not self-hatred. If we have self-hatred, we destroy others. Now, why I am saying that is some amount of self-love, first understanding, integrating our personality is the important qualification to help others. Sometimes we have inner conflicts and we want to outwardly show that I am interested in serving others. This has happened in several nuns' stories and others who are busy helping others, but internally they have a lot of conflicts, and very often these conflicts are projected into the community which we are serving. So unless we have integrated personality, we cannot serve the community. So this is very important. Our own development, our own integrated personality and service to others should go together. We need to work as team for very important. And today, the greatest crisis in the country is living practitioners of values. We can give lectures, politicians, everybody, but very handful of people who have the courage of what Mahatma Gandhi said, my life is my message. I think how many of our netas can say that? They don't have the courage to say that. I think that's the message we can at least one iota of Swami Vivekananda or Mahatma Gandhi is what the courage they had. I think if we can leave those, not by talks, not by preaching, but by living practitioners of values. That's the message. And if you can leave that, a sustainable lifestyle, equity in everything we do, especially taking care of the poor, and a corruption-free society, I think we have done everything. And lastly, very often people ask me, how do you, well, you gave up everything, went to BR Hills. I have never felt a moment of boredom in BR Hills. I don't see television. For almost 20 years, I never went out of BR Hills. I never missed anything. When I'm in Bangalore, I watch news. But every moment was a challenge. It was a great joy and fulfillment. The number of, I being an instrument of Swami Vivekananda to save lives has given me tremendous joy and fulfillment. My classmates at that time in the 70s was a craze to pass, it was called, USMLE was called ECFMG, to pass that and go abroad. My classmate is an oncologist in Chicago, earns more than $2 million, and he came, saw my work, he says, you are leading much more meaningful life. And I survive on $1.5 a day. I don't accept any salary, but I don't have bank balance, but I have tremendous joy and fulfillment. So what I say is, conventional way of life for the doctors is to go do post-graduation or go abroad, make money, have a car, a bungalow. In America, it is a 5 acres land bungalow in America. Most of my classmates have. You can achieve all of that. But will it give us the joy and fulfillment? Can we take a little unconventional, a challenging work? As IIT graduates, can you discover something which can transform the rural poor? A technology which can make a difference to the people? I think that's the challenge we need. Don't go in the same footsteps of IITs getting into America. Anyway, I don't want to tell that. There's nothing wrong in it, but even if you do, let us come back and have some concern. Whatever we do, let us see that the poor have some benefit. The technology not for making the multinational companies richer, a technology, appropriate technology which can make the difference to the poor people in India. That was Swamiji's message. Today we are celebrating this on the 150th birthday anniversary of Swami Vivekananda. It's a proud moment. Swamiji wanted such 1,000 people who can transform the country. I'm sure there are many here. Let us all join hands and make the dream of Swami Vivekananda a true. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for the very thought-provoking lecture. There are very few doctors who talk about rural development. Most of them are busy making money. So how do we inculcate this kind of a thought in our young doctors?
Again, I think by practicing ourselves. We have what is called a community medicine. In Bangalore Medical College, all the students when he used to turn back, they used to play with paper barrels. It was uninteresting. Community medicine is something boring because he was unauthentic. He had never worked in the rural areas, but the professor of community medicine would teach us the community medicine. That's the hypocrisy in the medical school, first of all. So we need to, or our professors of clinics, we have clinics. I mean, nobody talks about the economics of the patient. How do we have the concern for the poor? It's never taught. We are all busy. We become robots. We examine. We are interested in diagnosis and coming out how to manage in the ideal lifestyle what has to be done. But if there is a poor patient, if I do not have what is the alternate, and you still remember some of the famous professors who made John, even we say palpation. Palpation is feeling any tumor in the abdominal mass. We call it palpation. You palpate his purse and see how much money he has. This was the type of thing. If you have money, you treat. Otherwise, you don't treat. That's the type of low level of ethics in medical ethics, which was not given from the professors. The concern for the social concern for the poor was not. And only way is to show it by practice, not by lecturing. I think let us practice, let us show that, and that is better. Absolutely. But let me say that in this country there are good people. Even in the Karnataka public health system, I have seen, I used to go in the middle of the night to see whether doctors are staying. There were good people. About 15% still there are good people in the country. That's my listening. There are 15% genetically linked corrupt people, you can't change them. But the other 70% are fence sitters. What I mean by that, if the leader is good, they all join. The 15% good people and the 70%, 85% are with you. If you are bad, they also become bad. So a lot of fence sitters are there. So there are hardcore corrupt people, hardcore good people. They don't change. But 70% is the one which you can easily change if you are a good leader, or you yourself practice. So with 85% we can transform the country. So we need good leaders.
If we work for the society and we are serving them without asking any money from them, then how do we or you earn for your own basis?
Yeah, I'm not saying that we should not earn for our own livelihood, but I am single. And I made this commitment to Swami Vivekananda. I will not take salary if my needs have to be given by the community. That's a commitment. All Ramakrishna Mission sadhus, we have a sadhu here, he also practices that. So I follow the same philosophy. I don't ask I never bought my clothes. Either my sister or my friends know my needs, they keep it in my room. My watch gets old, I don't ask, but it automatically comes to me. So somehow things come to me. I am surviving on that, but I am not advocating the same. Take for your livelihood, whatever is needed, but not for your greed. That's what I am saying. So if it is for greed, there is no end. I mean, why should we cheat people? I mean, such horrible stories. Why I got into Lokayukta was when the tribal patient went there to a teaching hospital because he didn't pay the bribes. It was intestinal obstruction, a young person, and eminently you could have saved him, and they didn't operate in time and he died. Just because he could not drive people. That's inhuman. The insensitivity of the people is what is really scary. I mean, nowadays the salary is also increasing. We can lead a decent life. There's nothing wrong in accepting whatever is needed, but the greed should not be there. Greed in medical profession, making people suffer and they lose their lives because of your greed, that is insensitivity. That should not be there. That's my point. But you should make your lives comfortable. There is nothing wrong. There are many doctors who are married and leading a decent Abhay Bang, Rani Bang in Maharashtra. A couple of doctors who are working. There are many such examples who can. But greed is what I am against.
So one question. This example that you've given of this tribal knowledge-based indigenous alternative to a cough syrup.
Yeah.
So does your organization support, by which I mean fund, a systematic study of these, tribal knowledge-based alternatives to allopathic medications?
Yeah. What I am saying is all the traditional health practices, I call it a gamut of that. Because many people are interested, especially pharmaceutical companies, if there is any particular herb which they can exploit and they can get the intellectual property right. So we have a biodiversity registers in these villages. So whatever knowledge is there, first registered there. We need to screen. Sometimes we get a wonderful drug. Many such drugs are brought from the knowledge of indigenous people, including digoxin and many of them. So we need to be. But I want at the same time protect the rights of the patent rights of the indigenous people for that. And we do that. So we have a biodiversity register. Wherever we collect the knowledge of the people, first register with the biodiversity register and then see that knowledge is opened up. Otherwise, there is systematic exploitation, people going into the tribal areas, collecting the data and exploiting them. That's very dangerous. But I'm not interested in one particular drug which will transform the whole thing, but how to take care of day-to-day healthcare problems. I'm more interested in that. If 25% of the problems can be managed with the traditional healthcare system which they have, so how to systematize it and add it to the existing system, over and above that add the existing system to take care of that. Now snake bite cases, for example, I still say anti-snake venom serum, I still give that, but they have some simple technique of using a herbal fiber to use it as a tourniquet, and they have a psychological mantras which they give, which gives them tremendous psychological. Now that's where the traditional priest, he's shaman as they call it in tribals. Tribals think there are two pranas. One is a simple thing which can be cured. The second one they know he is going out, nothing will cure them. When they go to that state, they will not keep them in the hospital, they take it away. So at that time I ask them to, in a serious patient, the shaman also comes, does his rituals, which he gives the psychological benefit to the patient, which I can't give, my medicines cannot give. I can also talk a little bit psychologically, psychotherapy, but I am not a substitute for the traditional shaman. So I combine both. The shaman does it, plus my antibiotics will also work for it. So combine both. Don't degrade the other, don't deny them the whatever the culture has given them. Combination of that traditional and the modern is the best.
Interact with Dr. Sudarshan in person. So please let us give a brief hand to Dr. Sudarshan. So now I would like to inform you that as part of concluding celebrations of 150th birthday of Swami Vivekananda, events are started since yesterday there is a quiz on Bharat, like Bharat Jano. So it's 80 people, 80 students were registered. We have prepared 125 question papers. At the end, 170 students turned up. So a very big thanks to the students community. Now I announce the prizes, and the first prize goes to Anurag Basan. I request Dr. Sudarshan to give a book of Swami Vivekananda and cash prize to Anurag Basan. So please congratulate Anurag Basan. Second prize goes to Vindhyavasini Prasad. Third prize goes to S. Sai Santosh. Four consolation prizes. Rama Raviteja, Vikram Singh Rathod, Sushant Katia, Utkarsh is there. Now I request our Honorable Deputy Director, Professor S.P. Gupta, to give a memento to Dr. Sudarshan. I request Professor A.K. Jain, the convener of Institute Lecture Series, to give the history of Roorkee books to Dr. Sudarshan. Now it is the time for vote of thanks. So, the moment I called Vivekananda Girijana Kalyani Kendra in his office, immediately they have given mobile number of Dr. Sudarshan, which I never expected, and when I called him, immediately he accepted our invitation. So please let us give a big hand once again to Dr. Sudarshan. And special thanks goes to Professor S.P. Gupta, the Deputy Director of IIT Roorkee, for his continuous support and wishes to all of us. Please thank Professor S.P. Gupta. And very special thanks goes to Professor A.K. Jain, the convener of Institute Lecture Series, for his continuous support. And finally, thanks to audience and also the publishers from Ramakrishna Mission for taking time to come over here, and also the Chinmaya Mission and other publishers. So thanks for your attention and your presence.